Welcome to Grove Bites. I'm Richard Steele. Grove Bites are short interviews with the authors of some of our latest books. Today I'm looking at the first book in our new discipleship series. The book is Anglican Discipleship, Everyday Faith and Everyday Witness, and its author is the Rt Revd Martyn, Bishop of Leicester. I began with a fundamental question: how would he define discipleship?
So in this book, I've used the definition of discipleship really around calling and being sent. So the idea of being called to be with God, to be with his son, Jesus Christ, but then being sent out into the world to proclaim the kingdom of God, to bring healing and so on. So it's based on that simple definition in Mark's gospel, where Jesus called the disciples to be with him, and then he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And I liken it to to breathing in and breathing out. So the sort of basic rhythm of life and the rhythm of discipleship, being called to be with God and being sent out into the world.
Yeah. Why do you think discipleship is suddenly a word that's being talked about so much? I mean, this is the first book in a new series on discipleship. It's very much being emphasised in the Church of England, but other parts of the Anglican Communion too. Why do you think that is?
That's a really interesting question because, of course, yes, it wasn't always the case. In fact, if you look back in church history, there aren't many times that discipleship has been a word that's been used a lot. Even within the New Testament, it would seem that it dropped out of use fairly early on in the life of the church. And certainly when you look back at Anglicanism, the Church of England prayer book, you won't find the word discipleship used except when talking about the first disciples or quoting from the New Testament. So why has it come back in just in recent years? Well, I think there's potentially a number of factors in that. I mean, some of it may be to do with sort of charismatic evangelicalism, using a number of sort of terms from the Bible and so on. It may have its roots in Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his book, The Cost of Discipleship, as it was translated into English, which of course became very, very popular in the 50s and 60s and so on. But I think particularly it's been picked up now, of course, by all sorts of people. So Pope Francis, using the language of a community of missionary disciples. A former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, wrote a beautiful book on discipleship. And of course, even now in the Church of England, we're using that language of missionary disciples as part of the Church of England vision for the next 10 years. I think it's primarily because it offers us a way of beginning to reimagine how the church in this country in particular might engage with society in a different way. So post-Christendom, looking at how we engage with society, it offers us a slightly different narrative around all of that.
But you do start your book by saying people in the Church of England aren't necessarily very comfortable with the word in a way that other Anglicans around elsewhere in the world are. Why do you think we're not comfortable? Is it just because we're not familiar with the concept, or is it a bit more than that?
I think it's partly because we're not familiar with it yet, because, as I say, it's not the language that's been used in the Church of England up until recently. But I guess it also gets to the heart of what might be called sort of almost competing visions for the future of the Church of England. And there are some who do indeed see the language of discipleship as a sort of narrowing of our vision, that actually, we're here for every person in society, the parish system being about how we care for people, whoever they are, regardless of their beliefs, etc., etc. That's important. That's an important part of our heritage. But I think what we're recognizing now is that actually, the days when we could simply wait for people to turn up at our churches and assume that, at the various transition points in life, they would simply turn up on our doorstep, that they would then understand the language that we use in church, and that would have all the sort of cultural background, if you like, of Christianity. Those days are actually gone. Fewer and fewer people are approaching the churches for even the occasional offices, baptism, wedding, funerals, and so on. So we have to think about a different way of engaging with society. And I think discipleship offers us that vision of how actually every Christian, every baptized Christian, can play a part in terms of how they live out their Christian life in their workplaces, in their social networks, in their homes, what we now refer to as everyday faith. It is a different way of engaging with society, but I think potentially a very important one for the future.
And how good a church is at picking up that and supporting people in their everyday faith, as you describe it outside, because often the Church of England is very much, or it's seen as very much focusing on its services, isn't it? Do you think churches are getting better at supporting their members trying to live out the faith in this way?
I think it's a hugely varied picture, isn't it? I think some churches absolutely have taken this on board and are doing a lot more. But there have been a number of recent surveys which have shown that that a lot of people think that actually what they do in church does not equip them for then living out their Christian faith, particularly in their workplaces. I mean, I think that's been one of the great challenges of recent years. That actually a lot of people think that it just doesn't equip them for the sort of ethical challenges they face in their workplace, for the conversations that happen about, what did you do at the weekend? Why on earth do you go to church? How do we equip people for these sorts of conversations and the decisions that they have to make in their workplaces? I think increasingly we're discovering that actually what we do on a Sunday or midweek, whenever it is that we happen to gather in response to God's call to be together, if you like, has to then equip us for how we are sent out into the world. And if it's a divide, if actually we just come together on a Sunday for our own sake, if you like, just because we enjoy being together, then we're going to struggle in terms of our mission in the wider world.
Now, this book is the first of a series, and we will be making a lot of the experience of Christians in other parts of the world. And you've had direct experience of that through Churchmen Society. And you've said you talk of the bold approach of our brothers and sisters in the Anglican Communion. What sort of things do you mean by that? What's different maybe from your overseas experience than some of the churches, some of the Christians in the UK?
Yeah, so as you say, I've had a huge privilege of travelling, in various different parts of the world. And I think what I've observed in a number of different places is that actually Christianity is woven into everyday life in a way we just seem to struggle with here. So, I think of my time in Africa. Every journey, when we set out on a journey in a car, we would begin with a prayer. There was an expectation that actually you would pause before you started the engine of the car and you would pray together. Just a little example, if you like, but that idea of prayer being woven into the everyday life. And conversations, so many places again where conversations would naturally turn to questions of faith in a way in which we struggle with here. And I think, alongside that, a confidence in the Christian faith, which again we just seem to have lost somewhat in the Western world, because it has been so questioned in this part of the world. Whereas actually in many other parts of the world there is a boldness to it and a confidence that ordinary Christians are confident in speaking about their faith, in praying in public, all these sorts of things. So we have a lot to learn from Christians in other parts of the world. I'm absolutely convinced about that.
And we will be hearing voices from many parts of the world as we feature further volumes in this series. Grove Books are very excited to be partnering with the Anglican Communion for these books. If you'd like to read more of Bishop Martyn's exploration of discipleship and the way the Church of England is moving to support more of an everyday focus, then go to the Grove Books website, where you can order Anglican Discipleship as a print copy with free postage or as a PDF. There are many more great Grove books applying the Bible to a wide variety of situations. They're written by authors who know what they're writing about. Grove Books are bite-sized publications that you can really get your teeth into. Goodbye for now. Hope to see you again soon.